Hello and welcome to ClockTower Game Studios. Today we're going to be continuing the Koban build, or the Japanese-inspired police station. As you can see, last time we finished up the build on the first floor, including cutting in some resin details and adding some trim around the base of it with some cardstock. The top of it there's a few spots that are a little bit proud and not quite match up as far as the level of the walls go, but that's okay. We're going to trim those down and hide them with some more cardstock in the next step. Well, in the continuing steps. There's also a little gap in the back, but that's okay. That's going to be hidden under an overhang, and there's going to be a couple barrels in front of it too to hide it. Trash barrels that'll sit behind the car. So next, we're going to start with this scrap I had from a previous build. It's a weird shape, so I'm just going to cut it down to the size I need it to be for the second floor. So as mentioned, I wanted to use the building that I had in the previous video as inspiration. And one of the things that I took from that is that it had an overhang that reached out over the sidewalk around it, and it also had an area that was almost like a carport. So as you can see, I'm just taking my measurements because it's not exactly 8 by 8. I'm taking my measurements of my first floor, the outer walls, and I'm going to translate that over to this odd shaped scrap I have here. After getting my measurements solid, I went ahead and cut off the excess foam. I just used that with my straight edge and multiple slow, steady strokes with the blade. Want to be careful not to tear the inner foam. You just want to cut it all nice and smooth, and you want to be sure to use a fresh X-Acto blade when you're doing this, or hobby blade. Either way, so my idea here was that I wanted this to be flush most of the way around. So anywhere where there's like the side of a building, like where my thumb is there, or on the opposite side, or around the back edge, I wanted to match up flush with the wall below it. And then on the front edges, both where it would hang over the normal sidewalk and over the parking space, I want there to be a reasonable size overhang. So as you can see, I'm just taking a measurement because I want it to be even with the front of the sidewalk. I don't want it to hang out all the way out over the street. So I'm just going to use my base to cut that across, get my mark and cut it. And once I've got that cut down to size, I'll get started on the next step, which is going to be deciding exactly how I want the office area laid out. Now that I have the base for the second floor cut out to the size I want, I'm going to start sizing up how exactly I want my furniture to fit into the office that'll be visible from the outside of the building. Now again, this isn't going to be playable. This is going to be enclosed by glass windows, and I haven't finished my finalized design for how the second floor is going to be laid out at this point. I'm still kind of messing with it and getting a feel for what'll fit and how. So at this stage, I'm just messing with the furniture, which is printed off of Titan Forge's models. They were nice enough to let us use. I'll have links to their stuff in the description below, but it was from their March Patreon campaign, which was Cyberpunk, which was really cool. After finalizing the layout that I wanted to use for my second floor, I decided I wanted to nip off the corners on the front edges and give it sort of a bay window sort of look, where the walls will be set in at a 45-degree angle. So I went ahead and made my marks and measured those off, and then I'm just going to cut those off next. So I'll do that here off camera. While I was doing my cutting off camera, I went ahead and cut off my walls too. So I've just got the same 3-inch high walls that I used on the ground floor. I cut them off again, and this time I've cut off the front of the bay window and then both sides, and then as you can see, I made sure I labeled everything. I also ran off these 3D prints that I designed myself using Tinkercad. I've got the same as the interior door. I did some window frames. After getting that printed off, the next thing I did was I needed to cut the walls along the front edges where the bay window sides matched up. Those as they are just a 90-degree blunt join where there's a straight vertical cut. So after I change my blade here, the next thing I'm going to do is go through and carefully bevel those inside edges of those joins where those two walls meet up to around a 45-degree total. Now, in order to bevel the edges, I don't really get too precise with it because I don't have the tools for it. So I just carefully started my cut with my fresh blade, and then once I had that cut started, it was easy to go through holding the knife at an angle and cut along that edge just in one clean stroke. Now that's not a perfect angle. It just kind of took the cardstock off of the top side, and then I can go back with a second stroke, and you can see it's sort of a weird, almost domed shape there. So now I'm just going to take off that extra corner by sliding the side of my blade flat along the two edges of the cardstock. And what that'll do is that'll shave off the additional foam while leaving the cardstock cut where I wanted it. So I went ahead and made all the compound cuts on all the front of the bay window pieces that I needed to. And here you can see that they fit together nicely, and there's a nice clean edge there. It's still not going to match up exactly perfect, but it's definitely better than it was, and it'll be easy enough to conceal once we start painting and doing some interior detailing. Those whatever gaps are left, they're going to be relatively easy to hide. So the next thing to do is to decide exactly where at on the walls we want to cut in our windows and such. So this is the interior wall, which will be the back side of there where the label's at. This side will be facing towards the office, and this will be kind of the interior wall that you can't see past. It'll obscure everything behind it. That way I don't have to detail the entire building's interior, just this front office that I want to stand out as an important feature just for my own enjoyment. So here I'm holding up a couple models so you can get an idea for the scale of the door. The door is built with 28 millimeter scale models in mind, and there you can see I had a Primaris Marine who will barely fit through, and I want a window because I've envisioned this as being sort of the detective's office or the head honcho's office. So they are going to be sitting out over the street almost, while the rest of the office and the cells will be downstairs and in the back side of the building where you won't be able to see in. So here I'm just marking out where the door is going to sit in that wall, and I'm just being careful to go in at an angle so that I get around where I've got the trim on the door. I just want to get along that frame that I built into my 3D model. I went ahead and made rough marks using the resin material as my guide, but now I want to go back and make sure that this is square so it's true to the rest of the building. Now I'm just going to use my square here and just kind of use the high points on the marks I made using the window frames and the door, and I'm just going to remark over that so I have a straighter line to cut along, and that'll help me fit in the boxes on the back side of the resin prints a little bit easier. So here I'm just doing the window first, and once I'm done with this I'll start in on actually cutting out these and cutting the frames for the door and for the windows in. Now, much like in part one, I'm going to start by doing my cuts very carefully from one corner, and I'm going to cut away from it. So I'm just taking the very tip of my fresh X-Acto blade, pushing it very carefully through that corner all the way through, and then I'll go back over the line that I've got drawn, and I'll make that cut 2 or 3 times. But I won't go all the way to the next corner. I'll stop like you see there, and I'll move on to another corner. I never want to cut all the way into one of these corners. I always want to be cutting away from them. And eventually your cuts will line up and you'll be able to just pop that right out. And that's going to leave me with some nice clean corners. As you can see, there's no overcuts. There's no really nasty parts where it's an uneven cut. And my window frame that I made just pops right in there. Now, I've made a couple of these sizing things standardized. I've made the window there in the interior wall match with the front bay window. And the next thing I did is I've just got it all lined up off of that interior wall. Once I had that figured up, I made a measurement, and then I made the exterior walls all match that. So the windows are all going to be at the same height. So the next thing to do is to just get this measurement, go through, block in all these windows, and then to do the same thing. And I'm going to just follow the same process with that. I'm going to use the back side of the window frame, make sure I trace around it, and then I'm going to go through and cut these out in the exact same way. Once I had all those cut out, I went ahead and popped in the window frames, and I used Scotch tape to just kind of mock everything up and put it together, and just kind of see how it all went by dropping in the furniture and everything. I've got my Infinity model in there for scale, although from that angle you couldn't really see her, but here she is out on what will be the balcony. And the next thing I need to do, and one of the reasons scale is so important here, is I need to go through and figure out how tall I want the rails to be and how much cover I want them to provide. So there I had one 10 millimeter strip, a centimeter. I've got 2 of those there, and they're almost high enough. So I noticed that my foam core is around 5 millimeters thick. 2 of those means that it's almost exactly an inch. It's 25 millimeter and a little plus. And that gives me a wall that, including the base of the model, will put it somewhere between waist and chest height, which is exactly what I wanted. Now the next thing to do is, since I've got my measurements made and everything, I need to start cutting out strips of cardstock to use for that railing, and then as the trim that goes around the bottom side of a second floor all the way around. So doing that, the first thing I do is I true up my lead edge of my cardstock, and this is just food packaging off of a bulk container. You could also use cereal box, model boxes, it doesn't matter. Once I have my square edge, I go through and make my marks. And I'm going to be starting at a 25 millimeter because there's a portion of it that I only want 25 millimeters tall. So I'm going to just mark it on both sides using that same square edge to make sure it's right. And then I go through and I mark across it with my straight edge and then just cut it all off. So here you can see where I've got the building set up as a mock-up with all the progress I've got done so far. So I had some technical issues with my printer, so some of the details that I needed to get done before I could move on, I was unable to finish. I didn't want to put the rail on it yet because part of that ties into the layer below it around the sides, and I didn't want to have that exposed cardstock where I could damage it before I had a chance to really paint it and get it all set in place how I wanted. I want to make sure that the interior is completely finished because the next thing I need to do is paint it before I get everything assembled. So in the next video, I'm going to try and cover the interior detailing I'm doing because I'm going to do a couple different techniques to get that set up the way I want it and to make it look good before I move on and finish the exterior. I know this video didn't really cover any new techniques compared to the first part of the series, but hopefully enough of the thought process put into it helps come through that it's still a helpful video. The next video should include more techniques as far as like detailing and painting. I'm planning to do something a little bit different than what I normally do on the interior to help it look a little more alive. So I'm looking forward to trying that, and that's part of also what I had to wait on. I needed to pick up a few more items before I was ready to move on with that. But that's what to look forward to next in the part 3 of this series, which will be out on Thursday next week. Of course, Monday we also have our next hobby video, which should cover a painting technique called glazing. So I'm looking forward to doing that one too. And if you want to be sure and catch both of those videos, make sure you like, subscribe, hit the notification bell here on YouTube. You can also keep up with us on our other social media on Twitter, where I post regular updates whenever I'm working on stuff like this, and also on Facebook and Instagram. Instagram gets daily updates every time I'm working on something. Also, if you like what we're doing and you'd like to support the company, you can always check us out on Patreon, where we do monthly rewards. You can also check us out on Buy Me a Coffee to buy us cups of coffee, which is always appreciated. And lastly, you can shop for any of the equipment or materials we use in these videos by clicking on the Amazon affiliate links in the description below. Of course, we owe a big thank you to Titan Forge Miniatures for letting us use their models. These cyberpunk terrain features are really awesome, and I'm glad we get the opportunity to put them on showcase in a piece like this. You'll also be able to find links to both their Patreon and their website in the description below. And most of all, I'd like to thank you guys for watching this video and all the videos we've been making. Your support's really appreciated, and I hope everybody's enjoying these as much as I'm enjoying making them. And remember, at the Clock Tower, it's always game time.